All right, well, let's chat a little bit about some gaming news that happened this week. I think the one I primarily want to chat about is kind of what's sort of dominated the discussion really this week. Kind of builds on a lot of the AI discussions that we've been having on Remap Radio and elsewhere, but is really specifically about a game called Arc Raiders, which is a very popular extraction game. I have not played it. Have you dipped? Do you play Extraction? Have you tried Arc? Do you like extraction games at all?
I do sometimes, but it's like with the right group of people, and it is not necessarily my cup of tea, so I'm not missing out on anything by just not playing it. Like none of my friends a couple of my friends are playing it.
Is it too serious? Because I know you play hundreds of hours of like Repo,
it's
Phasmophobia, stuff like that.
The AI stuff.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
So that is, you drawing a line, feeling uncomfortable with something in the game, and then that being reflected in the types of things you'd like to enjoy, spend money on, is exactly where this was born out of. So Arc Raiders is out, and these days a lot of reviews are coming, especially for live service games, not at launch, coming later. And so Eurogamer dropped an Arc Raiders review in the past couple of days, and this social post, I think, summarizes a bit of what's going on here. This is from Eurogamer. For Arc Raiders to ride the wave of human sociability all the way to the bank, while also being so contemptuous of the thing that makes us social animals in its own workflow, demonstrates a lack of artistic integrity that I find impossible to ignore. I do, in a minute, want to actually just read from the argument that is made in the piece, because I think it is nuanced enough that it is worth fully understanding what is happening there, because I think it has been distilled down to, I don't like AI sort of kicking and screaming, especially depending on the social platform that you're looking at. No big shock that on X, it's a bunch of people saying like you deserve to lose your jobs. And
people are pissed.
Yeah.
But can you tell us about the score drop?
Right. So Eurogamer uses a 5-star system, and Arc Raiders was deemed to be an excellent game. Like, the game is good, but as a result of largely this part of the author's, the critic's feelings, who's Rick Lane, by the way, great follow on Blue Sky, really good critic in general. If you like thoughtful analysis like this, just keep following Rick and the work they do. It dropped, or at least it was scored. I think dropped is an interesting word to use, because that is definitely a lot of the conversation around this and the relationship between the criticism of AI and the score. But Rick gave the game a 2 out of 5, in which, if you read the piece, exciting, thrilling, well-made extraction shooter that is broadly appealing to audiences that might otherwise not be into extraction shooters. Your Tarkovs, and that like really appeal to super hardcore shooter fans. Like the bar to have any fun or like win a match is so high that they're purposely alienating. And part of what's been praised about Arc Raiders has been the fact that it's a lot easier for the average person to get into. And so to say that a game is seems like an excellent game, and then to deem it a 2 out of 5 based on sort of this like thematic disconnect related to the workflow is interesting. And this is where I want to read from the piece, so Rick's argument can sort of be outlined in full. So I'm going to read a pretty large section from the review, but I think it's useful. Like Embark's previous shooter, The Finals, Arc Raiders displays considered design. Also like The Finals, this design is overshadowed by the specter of AI. Arc Raiders uses machine learning algorithms for its arc animations, and text-to-speech-based performances generated from the voices of real actors. While I am deeply skeptical of AI use in game development, it's important to emphasize the nuances at play here. For starters, these two techniques are not the same. While Embark has further argued, less convincingly, that text-to-speech based performance is different from generative AI tools like ChatGPT. Certainly, machine learning is not a new technology in video games, experimented with by developers at least since the black and white days. The animations of the arcs, how they adapt to environments and react to being shot, are based on similar principles to black and white's creature AI. Embark has attempted to create emergent behaviors in its enemies through reinforcement learning, enabling them to move and react to terrain and player behavior in highly realistic ways. It's an interesting technology, and the effects it produces during matches are undeniably convincing. The same cannot be said about Embark's generated voice lines, which are aggressively mediocre and a stain on the experience. While speaking characters are mostly limited to traders, though player characters also vocalize emotes and pings during matches, when you do speak with them, their voices are flat and emotionally blunted, aside from the occasional bizarre inflection that reveals their robotic roots. It's telling that the sole memorable character in Arc Raiders is a rooster incapable of speech. Embark claims it uses AI voices so the studio can implement ideas quicker, creating new voice lines in hours rather than having to go through the longer process of manual re-recording and therefore rehiring actors. But NPC voices are not central to the experience, so I don't think this argument holds water. Even if it did, Arc Raiders' launch has been so successful, Embark could probably hire a team of live-in voice actors and still make gargantuan amounts of profit while benefiting from more memorable characters as a result. At the same time, is Embark's use of AI voices sufficient to compromise the game, given they are only a small part of the experience? I mulled over this for a while, and the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Because yes, using AI voices does compromise Arc Raiders, not just ethically, but artistically too. Let's start with the obvious point, that Arc Raiders is set in a world where humanity has been driven underground by a race of hostile robots. The contradiction here between Arc Raiders' themes and the manner of its creation is so glaring that it makes me want to scream. You made a game about the tragedy of humans being replaced by robots, or replacing humans with robots, Embark. It displays a total lack of awareness, or worse, willful ignorance of Arc Raiders' own semantics. This ended up creating a lot of, obviously, like, what is the role of a review? What is the role of the critic? What is, what should you be emphasizing and talking about in a review? Epic Games CEO Tim Sweeney, who's always great for a shitty quote, responded with, quote, political opinions should go into op-eds, and, quote, this technology increases human productivity in some areas by integer multiples, and views on whether this is a net good and should be rewarded or bad should be fought against are speculative and generally distributed along political lines. Well, go fuck yourself.
Okay, dude. Yeah.
It's my initial response to that. But I think, I don't do a lot of, like, discourse posting on, like, social platforms.
I completely stopped. I stopped in, like, 2019.
Part of it is I've been fortunate enough that the success of things like remap and crossplay mean that I just don't... I don't want to call it performative engagement, but there's part of being, like, involved in the larger conversation, so people, like, know who you are, you're participating. There's a bit of, like, sharpening your arguments and all that, but it's also, like, being a part of the larger conversation. The success of things like remap and crossplay means, like, I can do that here. I can have that nuanced, long, thoughtful conversation, work through my feelings along these long podcasts with a bunch of colleagues I have, in most cases, like, long histories with. As opposed to having to get that down into something pithy to share on social media. But this one really bothered me, where I was getting into it in the replies with some people, not nobodies. Like, I at least have the self-regard to go at people who have an actual profile in terms of this. But what really bothered me about it was this notion that it was the incorrect place to have this conversation, that it is somehow wrong for a critic of Arc Raiders to decide for themselves, and I mean critic in the more formal sense of, like, not necessarily like, and the critics of Arc Raiders, where it's like a critic assigned to thinking about Arc Raiders as a piece of art and what it means in our culture, that it is somehow wrong for them to place a value judgment on the game and its what it is as a piece of art, because they have qualms and problems with its use of AI. And what's important here is this developer has disclosed and honestly bragged about, not necessarily in a condescending way, but in a, this is helping us make games faster and more efficiently. Here's how we're doing it. We're going to talk about that process. They've put on the table we are proud of this. This is how we're making the game, and we're gonna front it in a way that puts it very much on the table for someone to look at that and go, I disagree. This is gross. I don't like if this game can only exist in this form because of this, then sit with the fact on whether it should exist at all, because just because you can doesn't mean that you should. And I think it's totally fine for a critic to draw that line and hold that against the game as heavily as they would like to. Like, whether I, in the same position, would, let's say hypothetically this game was 5 stars and became 2 stars on the weight of the AI question. Would I have done that? I don't know, but this critic did. And they make a very thoughtful, considered argument over why they arrived at where they did, how it made them feel, and why that ultimately impacted their experience and feelings on the game as they played through it. There's everything about the Eurogamer review is defendable in the very basic sense of they make an argument that you can disagree with. You are allowed to respond to the game and hold it to account in whatever way you choose to draw your personal lines on. And for this critic, the AI stuff really bothered them. They forwarded it, and you can either agree or disagree, but I think it's entirely defensible for them to include that. And I don't know, it super bothered me in a way that a lot of this other AI stuff has not bothered me, but this one in particular really got to me, and it was, I think, further emphasized by your own point of wondering whether you wanted to engage in this game at all, purely, or at least heavily weighed by the AI question.
Well, what's the difference? Like, I'm asking sincerely here. What is the difference between, like, criticizing the game for its use of AI and giving it a lower score because of its use of AI, and, like, saying that, like, giving it a lower score because of something else?
It is, ultimately, it goes back to a tension in criticism as old as time, which is objective versus subjective. Like, there is just a line of thought in folks who usually respond to negative reviews that if they're upset over a negative review, it is because their belief that there is some objective way to judge whether a game is good or bad, and if you did it wrong, it's because you brought too much of the subjective or yourself into it. Because that was the point I was making to somebody online was, okay, so let's say this game didn't use generative AI, and it was poorly optimized, which has been an ongoing problem in a lot of games this generation. Like, so how many stars is that? Like, how much is that? Like, what is that worth? And that's the one question they wouldn't respond to. They're like, well, that's, besides the point. No, it is the point. Like, how much do we drop that for? 1 star? 2 star? 3 star? Your inability to answer that dismantles the argument on its most fundamental level, which is that it's ultimately, like, criticism is a subjective experience. And the fact that this has caused such an uproar is, in many ways, very flattering and complimentary of the review itself, because I think it has put a lot of folks who are thinking about this technology, defending this technology, advocating for this technology, which is almost always exclusively top down, not bottom up, in terms of whether it should be used, how it should be used, consequences be damned on what might happen if we go full-throated with it. And if it makes those folks feel uncomfortable, well, it's probably asking the right questions. It's probably posing some interesting ideas. And, the role of a review like that is not to make ARC raters sell less copies. Because the role of, and this is, is the role of your review. And, I've written different kinds of reviews over the course of my career, in which, like, especially early on, they really were much more like thumbs up, thumbs down product reviews. Like, is this good, bad? Like, is this worth your time? Like, and there is total fine in worth in that. And by all accounts, Arc Raiders is an excellent fucking video game that accomplishes a lot of really hard game design and is going to pretty thoughtfully expand extraction shooters to a wider audience. Like, bravo. Like, who did that? Like a bunch of humans who thought through a lot of really hard problems and leveraged technology in interesting ways to help them solve that problem. And then once that continues to extend to things like generative AI, having voice actors not brought in to record, the thing is, like, if that doesn't bother you, that's fine. Like, maybe I'm judging you for, but like, it's fine. Like, we all in our daily lives draw lines on different things at different points. Like, none of us are like free from sin. We all have like different value judgments and lines on ethics and morals in which we choose not to engage with something. And this isn't just video games, it's just life. Like, that bothers me, I'm not going to do that. And maybe for someone else, it's like, well, I don't draw the line there on that thing, but like, I draw the line on this other thing that like you don't. And like, that doesn't necessarily make you a bad person. It just means we're all complicated and different and have different value structures. And that's what ends up really bothering me here, is the notion that it's improper for a critic or a consumer, like a player of games, to say, if you disclose that you're using generative AI, it is therefore wrong for me to not want to engage with the work because you disclosed it. And I think that is fundamentally the wrong mindset to have about this stuff.
And the people who are mad about it, they are going to play the game anyway. So like, what is the point of being mad about the review? If you are going to, like, you're already playing the game, I'm sure your friends are playing the game, why are you responding to the review and calling it a bad faith review? It doesn't make sense to me, but it's also, this is part of discourse on the internet.
Well, it's an extension of, games as, or, like, sort of, it's an extension of things in like stand culture, but like it's like games as identity. And so I think you see this like in like an executive like Sweeney's response, in which a review like this that says, I am making a moral and ethical, I am judging this piece of art because of the way it was built and what that represents, especially at this moment in time. Like, especially at this moment in time where it feels like the lines are being drawn on what we should accept and how the culture should move forward with this technology existing. That if those people are angry and upset, that means this means this critic is asking, if you feel uncomfortable, you should be asking, why do I feel uncomfortable that someone is shaming for this? Like, if you feel so confident that this is the right decision, then nothing about this should rankle you. And that is on a level of like creatives that work on the game, folks who are advocating for this technology. But then you can see that drips down all the way to just average players who are getting upset on, again, primarily we should say X, which is like, when this was a problem 10 years ago, when you try and like get a sample size of what is the quote internet saying. That is like basically impossible to actually crystallize on a platform like X, when its algorithm is explicitly tuned. Now, all social media does this, but X in particular is tuned to platform like far right, like rage bait sort of
it's
like
kind
responses.
it's unusable now.
Which also means it is sort of it's like unusable as a platform, other than like I only use it because like there are certain political and like sports reporters who just won't get off it. So I have lists on there that like that every time I open the app, if I could pay I don't want to give Elon Musk money, but if I could pay literally anyone money to just make the For You tab go away so I could just see sports, politics, like the two things I just want to see on there, I would. But you can't use something like X as a sample, a meaningful sample of like what people are saying. Well, who are these people? Like,
yeah, right.
It's the worst people who are, and many of them are going to have a check mark next to them, which means anything they're saying is very difficult to take for granted, because they can profit off of what they're saying if you engage with it and it's shared around. And so, it becomes a question of like, how big is the response to this review really? And that's just impossible to tell on a rage bait platform like X. Whereas on Blue Sky, I see a lot of, obviously, this reflects my own preferences, tastes, political leanings, but like I mostly just see people like thoughtfully engaging with the review, like defending it as a form of criticism. And
I saw I was going to say, I saw a great quote tweet from Nat Clayton, and that was going a little viral, that says, sort of incredible to read a review that doesn't just make a vague nod at AI being bad, but actively reckons with the ways in which falling obsessively to AI usage actively obliterates the artistic intent and integrity of the work you've made. I feel like Eurogamer putting something like this out and so thoughtfully criticizing the use of AI is just hugely important at this point, because you don't see major outlets really doing that much criticism of AI in games. Like, it is happening, of course, and it's happening on a lot of the outlets that I follow that are much smaller, but it's important that this came out now, I think. So,
well, and again, it's the disclosure, right? Like,
yeah.
If our creators didn't, we see this all the time online, where some artwork will come out and it's increasingly hard to tell, does the artist suck or did they use AI? And those are always like really frustrating conversations, where every time it ends up in a place where it's a bunch of people who just dunked on an artist they didn't like, not that they used AI. AI is like a really sad place to be. I understand why we're at that point, this point in time. Everyone's suspicious, and especially if you want to try and ethically engage with art, you're looking for signs, if not disclosures. Like, and in this case,
right.
there's a disclosure. Like, we probably talk about games on this podcast. We will talk about games on this podcast, in which the tools, either in small or like in many ways, use generative AI, and we won't know it. I'm not going to sit and feel like active sense of shame over something I don't know better about. The difference here, the developers said, we're using it, we're talking about it. It then becomes on the table for you as a consumer to say, all right, I have information that allows me to make a decision.
Right.
And that's what makes the future scary, is I do think we're about to enter a world in which a lot of that doesn't get disclosed, or becomes part of workflows in a very muddy way. Like, what does it mean to play a game that has generative AI because it happened at like the concept art stage but didn't happen after that, versus, hey, we hired voice actors. And in this game, from what they disclosed, the voice actors signed off on their voices being used as part of this technology. But like, it's also very easy to imagine, like, what were you going to do? Say no to signing off on your voice being used as part of the technology if you wanted to keep the role? Sorry, I know you're going to say something.
I was just going to say, kind of, it's semi-related, but my Instagram reels recently have I've started getting a lot of AI, like domestic pet videos, which I watch a lot of cat videos. I love cats, and I like to see their cute little paws, and I like to see them doing things. My mom, I'm pretty good at discerning AI stuff. There have been one or two where I'll get a video a couple days later of a guy being like, did you also think that this was a real video? Let me show you why it's AI. And I'm like,
the one where like the bear was down jumping on a trampoline.
Well, the bunnies was the original one of those, and
okay.
It got me.
It got a lot
I'm
of
embarrassed
people
to say, but
no, you can't. I mean, I think embarrassed is the wrong word. Like, you're like embarrassed in retrospect, but like you shouldn't feel any sense of shame for something that is like actively deceived. You weren't participatory in like looking the other way.
Right.
It's more that you find out retroactively that, oh shit, I was tricked and deceived into engaging with something that I morally and ethically disagree with. That sucks and like makes me feel bad.
My mom sent me two videos. My mom sends me reels sometimes. She sent me two videos, both of AI, like pets doing stuff. I respond, I say, these are AI. I know it's getting harder to tell. And she sent me the most ominous response that just said, there's more fake ... And I don't know what she meant by that. I think maybe she just means there's more fake in the reels than there are real ones. But
well, she might be right about that, but it still sounded vaguely like a threat.
Yeah. But that's all the related to just like the non-disclose, like people not disclosing that they're using AI, and then you find out they're using Sora to make these videos of Jake Paul doing like his makeup routine or whatever.
And I've encountered the exact same thing where, so the entire idea of confusing AI art with art you just don't like, that happened to us once in Paris where for the first time there was just enough stuff that my oldest daughter was seeing that I thought it was worth, like, I'd check over at like some YouTube Kids video she was watching and like, makes sense that like a lot of slop would be ending up there, especially in like the YouTube Shorts sort of stuff, same way that you're getting in Instagram Reels. And I was like, let's have a conversation. And like I would just like, hey, like this stuff is kind of like, I'm sure you've heard of like, well, she's seen Gemini because her school and others use tools. They can't use Gemini, but like you'll see the logo around. And I'm like, that's like this ChatGPT thing I'm sure you've heard of. You're not allowed to use it. We can have that conversation when you're older. But I'm just letting you know that's off the table. But like, let's talk about what this like AI art stuff is. And I was like, when you draw, and she loves drawing, like you sit and you make a thing. With this AI stuff, nobody's making something. And actually they're stealing from people who do make stuff. And so, it's my opinion that this stuff is like gross and I don't want to engage and reward it. But I'm not asking you that every time you see something like that in your videos, you skip past it. I'm just letting you know what the score is. And she took like immediately was like, fuck that shit. Like I don't want anything to do with that. It's like a weird line you're trying to ride with like, there's no way for me to ban it, right? I can't ban her seeing AI work. I can only try and talk to her about how I feel about it and then hope, she makes some educated decisions, based on that. But I can't get rid of it entirely. And so we went to Paris. There was very funny, like she would see where you start to see a lot of this stuff in the real world is it's like small businesses like making art for themselves to like
I saw it at the mall.
Something.
I saw it at the mall in Berlin, the Berlin Mall, just like a wall covered in AI art. Yeah.
And like when I see a little mom and pop shop using that to advertise like I was like, it irks me, but like I see where how this stuff ends up where it is. But anyway, like that stuff is so easy to spot even still right now that my daughter would be like AI art, and like one time she did it like in one of the shops and I was like, okay, okay, we don't need to AI shame the shop as we're walking through. But then we're going through some like mall area and there's this big sprawling art. It was very unique art style that she hadn't seen before. And she goes, "Ooh, look at that AI art." And I'm looking at it and I'm like, no, I think I just don't think you like the art. She's like, yeah, I'm going to call that AI art. I was like, no. Sit your ass down. We're going to talk again for a second. Well, I wasn't that hard. I was just like, no, those are different things. But when we would scroll through TikTok together, it becomes like because the Sora logo bounces around, right? It's not, and in theory, that is to try and prevent, there are like apps that will rip out, like if it's static somewhere.
Oh, I don't get them. I get them without the logo.
So this is the evolution that's happened. It started with the Sora logo in the corner, and my daughter would immediately cop that and be like, skip, that's an AI video. It involves humans. You can almost immediately tell, and she still can tell. Like there's, they just announced K-pop Demon Hunters dolls from Mattel, but there are all sorts of AI videos about like K-pop Demon Hunters toys and trying to trick you into buying different things. And you immediately, my kids could tell, like even my 5-year-old could tell, like that's, she doesn't know what AI means, but she's like that's, she could tell the look was AI. It's like swipe. But then increasingly, like the logo's disappearing, the tech is becoming very difficult to distinguish, and a lot of it is funny animal videos. And increasingly I'm having this moment with my kids, mostly my oldest, where like I'm like, oh, that's AI, and I'll swipe, and then like she'll try to swipe back, and she's like, it's not that big of a deal, and I'm like and that's just where we're at, right? Especially with a lot of young people, where this is going to become normalized, and I can have my conversations with her, we can talk about what it means, but like brass tacks is that like it's just becoming more and more indistinguishable, normalized with younger audiences, and it makes me pull my hair out, and it makes me want to defend stuff like this even more, which is like, okay, she's 9, I'll deal with that a little more thoughtfully as she gets older, and we can have more nuanced conversation about her relationship with those kinds of technologies. People in your 20s and 30s and 40s, like, better. Like if you feel shame reading that Arc Raiders review, think about it. Like, it's okay if you make the decision. I understand there are problems with this. I'm choosing to continue engaging with it because of whatever reason we all do that in lots of things in our lives. But if it did give you pause, it is worth like sitting with, why did that give me pause? Which,
right.
What else can you ask for from a piece of criticism? You might end up not following. It's not prescriptive. There's nothing at the end that is saying,
don't
by
play
the way,
it. Yeah.
You're a bad person if you play Arc Raiders.
Right.
And I don't think that's what I'm saying or you're saying here necessarily. But like, it gives you food for thought. Like, wow, it's thematically inconsistent. And it makes me feel gross if I think through the logical conclusions of where this technology is going. What does it mean for me to participate in that? And look, like the end of the day is like Arc Raiders is a huge success. It's sold millions of copies. It's a little bit like recycling. This actually has to be like a regulatory thing. Like, AI has to be regulated. Disclosure should be mandated in a Steam-like fashion.
Yeah.
So that you can decide where that line is for you personally. Like, what are, if it's everywhere, at least it's nice to know, like on the back of a box, like maybe you don't always read what's on the back of the box. So like, it's nice to know it's there and that you can make a decision on what you want to engage with. And I think that's kind of all that this piece is asking is like, just think about it. And if this made you upset, you should sit with why it made you upset. There was one of the last things I wanted to share was, we have quoted him before. He's a really great analyst for Nico Partners. Is on Blue Sky and acts Daniel Ahmad. Very funny and also is a very thoughtful analyst. Daniel wrote this. Arc Raiders is a multi-million selling game that has been positively received by reviewers and gamers and uses Gen AI. It turns out that when the final product is good or the tech is integrated in a positive way, the majority of consumers will accept it. This isn't to say that the general public doesn't understand how Gen AI can be and is used in negative ways, but the consumer-led boycotts or buyer shaming won't work in certain scenarios. One thing players do resonate with is how new tech like Gen AI may impact them, which is why focusing on the wider public perception, labor relations, and state regulation would be a more effective approach. Regardless, developers are continuing to experiment with and integrate the tech into workflows in the final product. AI native games aren't a thing and won't be a thing, but you can expect many other types of implementations, which is probably, like, again, I think that's lines up with kind of what I was saying before, like, we should have a regulatory apparatus that deals with this, thinks about this, and the downstream effects of its implementation. And that's where a lot of like the real energy should be put. We should just also accept that, much like my 9-year-old eventually sort of caving to Gen AI because they can't tell the difference, and I'm not going to shame a 9-year-old over that. A lot of like the mainstream, even if they're broadly maybe know that there's stuff in there, I don't expect that to rise to the level of them not engaging with it. But that doesn't stop you. Like,
I think everyone should get a job at Salesforce and work there for 1 week. And then I think your perspective on AI will shift to the most negative perspective humanly
imaginable. Because that's the difference between, like, what's the big deal? It's just a little prompt window where I ask it questions, and that is different than top-down mandated, make this part of your life. And for most people, it's just something they ask their phone or, you know, put into a chat window. Like, what's happening here is like a much larger, intrusive sort of vision of like how this stuff integrates into our daily lives. And I think that's what you're getting.
Why don't they just use like voice acting from internal people? I know I don't know all the nuances when it comes to
scratch tracks is what they call those, like, early in development before you cast VO.
But just cast someone internally.
Right.
Like why, like, this is one of the things I was always telling people at Salesforce. Like, they would send, like, videos would be sent internally with like AI voiceover, and I'm like, dude, I will voice this for you. It will take me 1 minute. Just send it to me.
Give me the lines.
Like, why don't they just do that? It sucks and it's shitty, and they should, you know, go the proper routes to hire voice actors and pay them. But like, instead of using AI, why not just ask, like, make a bench of people internally who are interested in, like, trying voice acting? Like, the voices would sound better.
What's the I want worse games made. Do you know what the tweet I'm talking? I want worse games made. What the tweet is.
I want worse games made.
No, I want shorter games with worse graphics made by people who are paid more to work less, and I'm not kidding. I think about that line a lot with a conversation like this, which is something we've discovered over the course of especially AAA video games over the last 20 years, is they are unsustainable. Like, it is unsustainable to make these games at this fidelity, at this scale, with the increased budgets, the increased labor force, and required to make them happen. And then the games have to sell so many copies to justify doing that investment again, knowing that it's going to cost more than it did before. And part of the illusion of AI is this dream that we just don't have to do anything differently. We don't have to make any sacrifices. We don't have to rethink what are the kinds of games that we make. Why do we make them? Should we make them? Could we do it another way? It is the promise that has that worked out before and it's made people miserable? Absolutely. Can we keep doing it and make it with the advances of AI? Absolutely. And that's a lot when you dig into what is the promise from a Sweeney or other folks. It's like all the problems that we've had making games are about to be solved by AI. It's not, should we keep making these games? How should we make these games? It's, we'll just keep doing it the way we've always done it, and technology will save us. Not a rethinking of the relationship to labor and game development, the scope of games. It's, this will solve, technology will save us. But all that's done is just shift the harm, right? It's let's take it at face value. Let's say that AI will do exactly what they're proposing, which is that it will save on the top scale of game development, make it more feasible. Because in the past, the only way to do that was to exploit labor. This is how we get crunch culture. It's we can only do this is if we destroy the lives of the people in the process. But we're going to solve that by taking away their jobs. It's just moving these awful goalposts somewhere else, which is those people we were exploiting, we don't need them anymore because we can just get the AI to do it for us. So we're going to take away their jobs. We're going to take away what they've spent their career building towards. And so if you really just take it to its logical conclusion, even take the promises on face value, we can keep making these big, beautiful games. And we can just take away the jobs of the people who were building them in the past. And that is an awful, awful place to end up. But does feel like that's where this all ends up. If it pans out the way that they're promising is we just won't exploit them anymore. We'll just make sure that they can't put food on the table, which is pretty ugly. But I think we're going to keep it there for this first part of the podcast. I'm gonna put positive energy into the world away from this awful segment on AI. That we're gonna have a wonderful special guest to join us for the games that we play in this week. So
wait, hold on.
Yeah.
Before we move away from AI,
sure.
Have you seen the Jake Paul stuff?
Wasn't he mad at it? I feel like this is Sora. The way it was pitched when Sora 2 came out was opt out. We're do you want to make videos of MLK running around and eating spaghetti? You can, until his estate says please stop. Which was the loop I saw with a lot of celebrities, but I don't know anything specific about
the Jake Paul. The Jake Paul stuff is wild because what people were doing it was so specific. They were making videos of him giving makeup tutorials and coming out as gay.
Essentially stuff that runs against the grain of his hyper masculinity posture that he portrays in the public.
Yeah, the one video that I saw that was like the fakest of them all was him floating in the air, like someone floating towards a like a pie on the windowsill. But he had to make a video that was like, please stop. Please stop making AI videos about me. It's ruining my partnerships and messing with my business. So that was those videos. I saw some of those. And wowie.
Well, and again, and that's along the, the ask permission later. You know what I mean? Sort of thing is like so much a part of the AI story. Like Sora, other Mid-Journey, things like that. It's like, well, we'll just steal and rip everything off, and you can opt out later. You already stole it. Like, that's not how stealing works. You don't get to opt out of the stealing process after the fact. And it feels like that's what's happening with all of this AI stuff across the culture, across the world, in video games, in places like Salesforce and elsewhere. Is we'll just do it, and like we'll apologize for all the shit that it breaks later. Like I've got a close friend who I mentioned before works at a company in which a lot of this stuff has been injected into the workflow, where they are being judged against not efficiency gains through use of AI, but how much literal percentages, like how much AI are you using on a month-to-month basis based on how much we have pre-bought that you then have to deploy. Again, it's not productivity gains. It is pure AI use because we are an AI-first company. And he's a really smart guy, and I'll ask him because he engages with a lot of this stuff because he has to through work, and then plays around with it in his personal time. And he's like, look, like he's a programmer, like makes his own little doodads and technology stuff, and it's all really neat. And he does use AI for that. But what he always points out is it's like really good at solving 30% of these mundane problems, but then it introduces another 30% that I have to fix. And he's like, it's worth it for that 30%. But if I don't know how to identify the other 30, I don't get any of the gains of the first, you know what I mean? He's like, it helps me not do some stuff I don't like. But then it does stuff that I don't want it to do. And unless I knew what I was looking for, I would never be able to identify the stuff to clean up. And so on an individual basis, it's easy to imagine how like, there's just one annoying thing I just don't want to do anymore, and this lets me do it. And like that's the promise of like any technology, is like what would make your life happier by eliminating the things that you don't want to do. That's far different than we'll just throw this stuff at the wall and not even see what sticks. We're just throwing it at the wall. It doesn't matter if it sticks. We're just going to keep throwing it. So anything else you thought, wanted to? All right. Well, let's stop talking about AI. Let's take a break. We'll be back after this break to talk about a bunch of games that we've been playing. I've been playing a bunch of Hades 2, Motion Wreck, Dispatch. I think maybe we should talk a little bit about Escape Simulator. And then if we're lucky, with a guest talking about some adventures in ancient Hyrule. So stay tuned for that. We'll be back after a break.